I'm Delaney Rustin, physician and the creator of the 3 Screenagers movies, and this is the Screenagers podcast. And before we start, I want to say something really exciting. We have a 4th Screenagers movie that releases in the beginning of September. I'm so jazzed about this. It's an elementary school edition of Screenagers. So for parents of students in elementary school, as well as for students of that age, and everyone involved with kids of elementary school age. It has all sorts of really compelling new data and great stories. It has social psychologist Jonathan Haidt in it, as well as other thought leaders. Jonathan Haidt is the author of the current New York Times bestselling book, Anxious Generation. It's been a lot of work to create this movie, and yet it is so worth it. If you want to know more, head over to screenagersmovie.com. Okay, so today on the podcast, we have a special episode. I'm joined by Lisa Tabb, my film partner and Screenagers partner, to discuss our Away for the Day campaign, which we launched back in 2017, which is all about getting smartphones out of kids' hands and pockets and really put away for the entire school day, be it in lockers, in locked pouches, in special boxes. We're going to be talking all about the campaign. And in the second half of the show, I'm going to share part of a recent conversation I had with Jonathan Haidt. We talk about his views about Away for the Day, something he believes in strongly and has been advocating in his new book, Anxious Generation. When I talk about Away for the Day, let me just say up front what I'm referring to. I'm referring to a website, awayfortheday.org, that Lisa and I and our Screenagers team created that has helped many people, such as parents and school administrators, advocate and succeed in getting their schools to become Away for the Day. And we just updated the Away for the Day website. It's really a great resource. We're going to talk about that today. Lisa and I discuss a lot of reasons why phones away for the day and smartwatches away for the day is beneficial, as well as other issues around these policies. And I'm excited for you to hear my discussion with Jonathan Haidt. Let's get going.
Delaney, I'm so excited that I'm hearing about so many schools and states and districts that are finally implementing phones off and away all day.
Yes.
The Way for the Day is all about providing resources and tools for people to change policies and get phones out of kids' pockets and backpacks and hands all day.
And smartwatches now, too.
The campaign is all about giving all stakeholders in our kids' lives the power to advocate for Away for the Day policies at their school. We have all the latest research, we have testimonials, we have policies, we have PowerPoints to help. We have even posters that we've made that you can print out and put up on the walls of the school to remind the kids about the new policies.
There are so many positive outcomes with Away for the Day. Let's talk about that. We know that grades and test scores go up when phones are away, and we know that social and emotional well-being improves. This has been shown in different studies.
Yeah, we're excited about all the states that seem to be coming on board. The LA Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in the country, the school board just passed an Away for the Day policy, having phones off and put away all day for kids of all ages. And that's supposed to take effect in January 2025. The New York City School District is going to be announcing something soon.
You and I just got back from being in Europe to interview principals and teachers and parents and students in countries where they have either legislated already for the entire country to be away for the day for certain levels of education, and also starting to do that. France, for several years now, has had Away for the Day. That is up until age 15 when they enter into their high school years. And the Netherlands, where we were, is instituting strong recommendations for the entire country to be fully away for the day. And we're seeing same things in Spain and Italy and other countries.
Yep. Greece, some islands are doing it. And yeah, I think we're seeing a domino effect.
I kept thinking about, Lisa, when we were in Europe, is just their students are going to have a way for the day. And if we lag on this and really don't do what's best for their emotional well-being, academic well-being, and their ability to focus in general, and other countries really take this on and continue to do this better, we're going to see this in a lot of data.
And we're going to see this in the industry. We're going to see this in performance of what the kids are capable of. They're going to fall behind.
You and I felt for a long time that for high schools, it was going to be a very strong dream to have phones put away for the entire day. So we were really targeting middle schools for the campaign.
We felt like the biggest win was just focus on the middle schools. In our initial campaign, we said, okay, high schools, that's a hard one at that moment. So that's exciting now. But we didn't even think about the elementaries. It was not an issue. Phones were not a problem in the elementaries. Phones have become a problem, but people definitely didn't have smartwatches. And now we've just been filming we have a new film coming out about screenagers growing up in the digital age. It's an elementary school edition. So we've been in classes, and I was in 2 classes recently where the teacher said, yeah, you're welcome to ask the kids. I don't think that many kids have the smartwatches. And so I just said, raise your hand if you have a smartwatch. And both classes, they were 2 sides of the country, right? It was not about geography. 50% of the kids raised their hand. And this was a 3rd grade class and a 4th grade class.
Wait, Lisa, I didn't know the teachers really didn't know how many students had them?
Yeah. Huh. And the principal too. Wow. The principal of one of the schools, who was the one I was interviewing, he said, yeah, it's not a huge problem yet, but I am actually going to make a rule because I'm seeing it starting to creep in. And so I looked at him when they raised their hand. I'm like, I think you better get that rule out there. But then I started asking the kids, so what do you do on your smartwatch? And he said, sometimes I text my friends in class. Another kid said I play video games. It's an issue. It is an issue. So it's exciting that everybody's starting to stand up. We have an issue now. And I always say that we have this gift we can give our kids of 8 hours of no access to social media. If we just have one rule, which is no phones or access to social media at school via their kids' devices. I really do think it's a gift.
It's funny you say it that way, which I think is excellent. I say it the other way, which is also equally true, which is what a burden we have put on our students to ask them to resist the most attention-grabbing device ever created. No matter how much I want to not eat a warm chocolate chip cookie late at night, if someone were to give that to me, it would be impossible for me to resist. And we are asking young people to try to do an equivalent of a warm chocolate chip cookie 8 hours a day in their schools when they have their phones on them. There are students that can resist, but there are those who just can't. The desire to be distracted, to connect with friends, to have a billion things to look at is really too much for most humans to resist, particularly when you're in a setting being taught something or asked to learn something that you don't necessarily want to be doing. Last year, Pew had a study and found that over 70% of high school teachers say phones are a major distraction in the schools. We know that from a few years ago, Dimitri Christakis and his team surveyed high school and middle school principals around the country, and there over 80% stated that they felt that phones had a negative consequence on social development and on academics. Let's talk about what kids are seeing on their devices at school. There's a lot of sharing and showing things, and many people don't realize that it's really a lot of what I call junk food. I mean, there are cool things and educational things that they share between each other, but definitely a lot of it is not nutritious. It's things from influencers, it's edgy memes. They're inundated by all this entertainment, and a lot of it is really about shock value.
Our third movie, Screenagers Under the Influence, is about vaping, drugs, and alcohol in the digital age. In doing that research, they're getting advertised to this. So having those reinforcements all day at school, as well as access, that's where they're getting it, not to be fear-mongering, but this is another part of all this.
I think it's a great point. In fact, we did a podcast episode where I was interviewing teens related to Instagram. They didn't think they got many ads on their Instagram. And then I said, okay, let's look at our ads. They were shocked how they were getting so much sugar ads. And one girl said, oh, here's a beer ad. There is absolutely no wall between what they see and what legally we would have advocated before and had with TV. It's a completely new landscape. I want to say briefly about social cruelty. One of the big things that a lot of people have been talking to me about recently are students who are making short videos of each other. And an example of one was an anonymous account about sleeping, and they would go around try to film students who were sleeping during class or dozing off and then post them. Yeah. And some students felt really bad about that. And it's just a tiny example. There's also the issue of fights get announced over social, and then there's a big group will go to witness a fight, and then they'll videotape that and it'll circulate. The list goes on. And of course, then there's all these smaller issues, but for somebody can feel really big. Who broke up with who, et cetera, et cetera. As we know, Lisa, there are pushbacks to Away for the Day campaigns, and there are myths that have people thinking the wrong things. One big one, we hear a lot about is this idea that parents don't want Away for the Day.
We knew from talking to so many parents that parents really wanted to support it. We knew that there were the vocal minority that were saying they wanted their kids to have their phones all day at school. So we did a survey. And we have such a great large sample size of all these schools that have hosted Screenagers, and we have so many parents that we surveyed.
As people who care deeply about research, we were the first to say this was a convenience sample, but we did get thousands of responses. CNN published our data on their website. The first thing that wasn't surprising to you and I was that over 80% of parents said they wanted their students to not have access all day to their phones.
People always say that they're worried about an active shooter situation or emergency. And all the experts and security experts we've talked to have said that it's actually less safe when all the kids are on their phone. You need them to be quiet. It's jamming communication lines.
There's another big issue it's important to address here. When parents and students are able to talk with each other through personal devices during the day, what can happen is that building of relationships within the school buildings can be hindered. Like if a student doesn't feel well, in the old days, they would get to know staff people by going to the front office and asking to use the phone. And they could become, friendly with the people there. Now that can be bypassed. Maybe they would have gotten to know a teacher more. We know of a student was not feeling well, texted on their smartwatch the parent, who then came to the school and then texted the teacher, can you send out Johnny? He texted me directly and he's not feeling well. I'm going to take him home. And the teacher was like, no, that's not the system. Please. Yeah. We will have him do the regular steps. Can you imagine if that was just the norm throughout an entire school? Not only would it be so chaotic, but that student would not have that ability to get to know the nurse, to get to know the staff in the office, to talk with a teacher, to advocate, I'm not feeling well, to get friends to help them if they're not feeling well. We know that school refusal and anxiety of students is high. And for some students, that safety blanket of the parent, we don't want to reinforce the anxiety, which is saying, I need to call home. I need to call my dad. I need to leave, because that just continues the malaligned thinking.
Yeah, that is a really good point. If the kid is feeling anxious and maybe needs to go and talk to the counselor, or maybe they've found somebody in the office that they like who can help calm them down and be a buffer and send them back to class in a calm way without them having to leave school.
We know that it takes work to make these kind of changes in schools. Lisa, can you share what happened when you worked with your children's high school some years ago? You really wanted to change the culture and phone practices there.
I know firsthand that it's hard in a public school setting. There's more people that have to weigh in. It took a year to get sort of a policy pushed through in my daughter's high school at the time. When we started it, there was this sort of classroom by classroom. They could decide whether they put them in the phone pockets. And so actually, while I was waiting in my usual way of impatience, I went and bought a whole bunch of those little phone holders that were like $10 a piece. And I got the school office administrator to agree to send out an email to all the teachers saying, I have the stack of phone pockets in my office, and if you want one, you can come get one. And she did credit me, which was nice. So I ended up getting emails from all these teachers saying, oh my goodness. Of course, my daughter, she was not super thrilled that I was spearheading this. But yes, that was in 2017. And we finally got it passed by the end of the year that all the phones had to go into pockets when they were in class. Remember, before it actually passed, I did a survey to see how many teachers were implementing this. And it was about 85% had done it on their own once they had access to these pockets. And it was just recently that I heard last year that the whole district created an away in class policy, which is part of what we're advocating. Of course, we do believe that away all day is the answer.
Lisa, I remember my kids' high school when it got announced at the assembly at the beginning of the school that they were going to go to phone pockets as well. And there was so much cheering from the parents. And last night at dinner, Tessa had a friend over, it's summer. So Tessa's home for the summer. She had a friend over and we were talking about Away for the Day, and the friend remembered all the different teachers who was using the phone bags and how helpful it was. So what we were seeing happen in high schools were these classrooms where teachers would put them in phone pockets or other ways. The problem there we have found is that when some teachers don't do it, then students get confused and they get more lackadaisical. Those teachers that were using pockets then could also become a little bit more laissez-faire. I want to add a point about students here because our work is so much about getting the voices of students. All three films are all about watching them, adults, teachers, grandparents with kids. That's the whole movement, whether they see them all together or it's in school also. And then they have discussions that are ongoing related to the themes and stories in the films. So given that, you would think that, we need students' voices when it comes to devices out of schools. And what are they going to think? Here's a reality that needs to be at the forefront. The truth is, as humans, we do not enjoy having things that have treats in them taken away from us. That's how the majority of students will, at this moment in time when policies change, feel. It's not to say, though, that we can't have their input along the way. And in fact, when we were in the Netherlands, one of the big things that the school got were foosball tables, which are incredibly popular. And the students advocated for other things that could be made available to them. Bring in their voices, help to make the transition easier, but recognize that this isn't about getting buy-in from the students at this point. We do know when schools have changed and you go around and you talk to students, there'll be a fair amount of them who say, I'm glad it changed. And if they haven't changed, if they have phones available, you will hear many students say they see the downsides of it. When I would go to schools and I would ask high schoolers, I'd say, do you think middle schoolers should be able to have access to their phones in class? And sometimes I'd say at school all day. But the vast majority of hands, 80 to 90% of high schoolers would say they did not think that middle schoolers should have access to their phones during the day. Now, this particular statistics relates to during class time. So it's really important that we know that students see the benefit of away for the day. And we still can include their voices on certain issues, like what can make the transition easier and what things would they like to see implemented to build school connectedness and have fun activities to do. And I know that my kids loved the assembly days, or just even at lunch when teachers they would have these funny lunch days where teachers and them would do relay races and things like that. Let's continue to build those kind of activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw it in the Netherlands. We talked to a lot of teenagers that had recently, the schools had changed the policies. And so we got to see firsthand early on what they were feeling. And we heard over and over again that they didn't love it at first, but they do appreciate it now.
Now, listeners, we're going to shift gears, and I'm going to share part of my conversation with Jonathan Haidt about Away for the Day. Jonathan, I know in Anxious Generation, you talk about the academic hit that is happening to our students with phones in their pockets or smartphones all day at school. Can you speak to that?
Data just came out in the US on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is the nation's report card. And the big news was, look at the big drop since COVID. COVID restrictions, we had kids were out of school. And look, they're learning less, they know less. They know less than kids used to 10, 20 years ago. But when you look at those graphs of the decline doesn't start with COVID. It starts in 2012. So in the US, we had 40 years of progress of increasing slow, steady increase in what kids are learning in test scores up through 2012. And then things start to decline. Now, that's not just because kids have iPhones at home. It's because that's also when iPads and Chromebooks come flooding into schools. The tech companies want the kids to have this because they want to get the kid on their system for life. So the educational technology that flooded into schools, it all has extraordinary distracting effects. There's no evidence that these things improve education. The technology is so distracting, the kids just have trouble learning. In addition to data on the US, we also just a few months ago got the latest installment of the PISA data. It's the one giant international study of education, 38 countries I think it's up to. And what you see there is the same thing as the US. That scores, in that case, they were fairly flat. It doesn't go back as far, but scores from the late 90s through 2012 were pretty flat around the world, not going up or down. And then after 2012, scores in reading, math, and science begin to go down. It's like when I was in school in the 70s, if they'd said, you know what, if you want, you can bring in your television from home and your walkie-talkies, you can bring in your record player, bring in whatever you want, put it on your desk, you can use it during class. Like, that's completely insane. How could you learn anything? But when a child has a smartphone in their pocket, that's what they have.
Let's talk about the fact that many schools say that they don't allow phone use, and yet they let students have their phones with them or watches with them all day.
Well, the great majority of schools say that they ban phones. They say you're not allowed, we have a rule, you can't use it during class, which is about as effective as having a heroin treatment clinic where addicts come in and your rule is you can bring in your heroin, you can bring in your needles, you can bring in everything, keep it in your pocket. Don't shoot up for the 2 or 3 hours that you're here for therapy. Like, that's impossible. They can't do that. So no, it's not a phone-free school unless it's away for the day.
Completely.
It's not a phone-free school unless the phones are either locked up in a special phone locker or in a yonder pouch. Those, I think, are the best ways to do it. Any policy that says, well, you can keep it on you, you can keep it in your backpack, but just don't use it. You're just committing yourself to all the adults having to play phone police, to constant conflicts over phones. So phone-free schools is just such an obvious thing to do, not just for mental health, but for education. If you want our kids to learn, don't give them the greatest distraction device ever invented in their pocket. There's a lot of technology. It's not just the smartphones. The key point is, does it allow you to send and receive texts? And so there are smartwatches. So in terms of in school, it's very important that none of this is accessible. Because if anyone can send texts, then everybody has to check because they don't want to be out of the loop. So whatever the phone policy is, it has to apply to the Apple Watches or other smartwatches, anything that can send or receive texts.
Yes, yeah, I know.
And of course, the watches have a lot of stuff on them. Those are distraction devices. In elementary school, it's extremely important that the kids not have access to anything that can send or receive texts or play games. I mean, why would you Why would you let a child during the school day play video games? In class, obviously, it's horrible, but even between classes or at lunch, they should be talking and playing with other kids. And that's what kids used to do until around 2010, 2011. Once social life moves on to smartphones, hallways go silent. This is something I hear when schools go phone free. They say, we hear laughter in the hallways again.
Jonathan, let's talk about the issue of parents who want kids to have phones in case of school emergencies.
Yeah, there's those who say, well, what about school shootings? If there's a school shooting, I want my child to have a phone. I want to know that she's okay. And I think the answer to that is very clear. First, we all have to understand it's insane that we have to think about this in this country, that we do have school shootings. But schools have been preparing for them for a long time now. They've done research. They're doing drills. They're showing the kids what to do. They're organized. And so what do you want? Imagine you could send your kid to 2 schools. In school 1, if there is, God forbid, if there is an active shooter, if there is some horrible thing happening, in school 1, the kids do as they're told. All the adults have phones. They're coordinating. The kids are quiet. They're doing what they're supposed to. That's school 1. Do you want your kid there? School 2, they have all the same procedures, but all the kids have phones. So as soon as something goes wrong, they pull out their phones, they're crying to their parents. The parents are rushing to the school before the emergency vehicles can get there. It's chaos. This is not going to keep your kids safe. This is actually more dangerous, according to school safety experts. So, I understand why it would make the parent feel better if they could hear from their child. I understand that. But if what we want is our kids' safety, then it is a myth that everyone having a phone is going to make them safer. It's not.
We know that the majority of parents want away for the day, but there is this minority that wants to be able to reach their child all day long, or their child to be able to reach them. What do we do about this?
So this is a very standard political problem, which is that a small number of people who care a lot about an issue can stop any legislation. They really care. They come in, they protest, they write letters. And the large majority that wants the opposite, but they're not as passionate, they don't do much. And so I assure you, almost every principal and every teacher wants a phone-free school. And they're stymied by the fear of what this minority of parents will do. But now my hope is that now that the word is getting out about what the phone-based childhood is doing to all of our kids, the large majority that want their kids to have a more play-based or real-world childhood, that this majority, if they start speaking up, if they start telling the principal, if they start telling the teachers that they want a phone-free environment for the classroom, and I would urge anybody who has the luxury of having a choice, if you get to choose what elementary school or what middle school or whatever that your kid goes to, make it clear to, if you're talking at any schools, ask the phone policy and say, do not want to send my kid to a school where the kids have phones on them, because they're just not going to learn very much. The key to solving this problem is that if you're acting alone as one person, one family, you're facing a lot of obstacles, and there's not a lot that you can do to change the community, change the school. But if a bunch of parents act together, then they can contact the school, and they're much more powerful if it's a group, if they motivate and inspire many others to contact the principal and say, we support you. We want our kids. We want the teachers to be able to reach our kids. And so we support a phone-free, away for the day policy. And that would include anything that can send or receive texts or play video games.
Lisa, you and I have been working to bring parents together around these issues for the past 7 years. And something that anyone listening to this podcast today, parents or school staff, anyone, can right now go to awayfortheday.org. And we've created a place where you can pledge your support for Away for the Day policies. We're really working to grow our pledges to even have more teeth to do our advocacy work. So we really encourage you to go and visit right now, and it just takes 5 seconds.
People are at a breaking point, and there are lots of things we as parents can do, and we as schools can do, and districts, counties. There's a lot to do along the way. And so how do you do it? Your school doesn't have it. The Away for the Day website is about empowering you with knowledge and science to go support this.
It was such fun to talk with Lisa Tabb and Jonathan Haidt about Away for the Day. To learn more about the campaign, to get involved, to be active, please go to awayfortheday.org. And remember that you can learn about our new Screenagers movie, the elementary school edition, at screenagersmovie.com. I'm really excited about that. Thanks for listening today. And if you can tell one friend about the Screenagers podcast, that really helps spread the word and helps people find the show. Be sure to go to screenagersmovie.com to find the show notes from this episode, learn about screening our movies, and sign up for my weekly blog about parenting in the screen age, now in its 8th year. This Screenagers podcast episode was produced by me, your host, Delaney Rustin, Lisa Tabb, Rebecca Tolan, and Alan Gofinski. Alan is also our sound editor.